How's it going, my dudes? This video's brought to you by Squarespace today. Taken up. The technology that's causing this kerfuffle is Krenim. Now, obviously, yay and hooray for today's observations, and we get to that. What is more exciting for me is the fact that it confirms that Krenim were also a part of the Temporal Wars as well. I'm sure that means there's a list we need to update somewhere, but that's fine. Because, what do we know about the Krenim and Anorax and the Time Machine? You see where I'm going with this. Of course, it makes perfect sense that they would be a part of the Temporal Wars. I would like more than just a name drop, I won't lie, but I did very much like that they were confirmed to have been a part of those events. We are going to take on one of the biggest yet least seen topics of Star Trek these days, which is the Temporal Wars. They were introduced in Star Trek Enterprise and have come back in Star Trek Discovery. But what do we actually know about them up to this point? Please make sure to check out the original article over on whatculture.com. In the meantime, I am Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here is everything we now know about the Temporal Wars. Number 10, the Nakul. In a way, knowing about the Nakul has allowed us to know when the Temporal Wars ended. They first appeared in the Enterprise two-parter Stormfront, they appeared at the very end of 0 Hour, but listen. And it was their faction that saw the conclusion of the Temporal Cold Wars. They were one of the many factions to fight in the Temporal Cold Wars. Their leader, Vosk, went back in time to Earth, struck up a deal with the Nazis so that the Nakul could use their materials while effectively helping the Nazis win the war. This bargain allowed Vosk and his team to work on a way of going back to the 29th century. Lieutenant Daniels, a frequent helper of Starfleet, managed to transport the Enterprise crew back to the 20th century as well, and with his help and with some of the Suliban Cabal's help, they were able to stop Vosk in his tracks. The Nakul have yet to appear in Star Trek Discovery. Also, they've yet to be named on screen. The name Nakul comes from behind the scenes information. Number 9, ancient races. Though the Temporal Wars seem to have been fought by beings primarily on, let's say, our plane of existence, the involvement of the sphere builders, more on that later on, suggests that there will still be more coming from other realms as well. With that said, what about the ancient races of the universe? While many faded many eons ago, like the progenitors, the preservers, and the Tikan Empire, the Q remain relatively active right through until apparently the late 26th century. Kovich says in the 32nd century that there hadn't been contact with the Q for around 600 years. Now, for those of us doing the maths, that would be close enough to the Battle of Procyon 5. More on that. This event both does and doesn't exist in history. Timey-wimey, we'll get to that. What happened around those years that would get the Q to sort of veer away from contact with the Federation? With the apparent death of John Delancey's Q in Farewell, might that have been a lack of interest in humanity after that? Although Q's interaction with Jack Crusher at the end of Star Trek Picard would suggest that the very nature of the Q being out of time, they may yet make an appearance with these Temporal Wars. Number 8, Khan shifting in time. The effects of the Temporal Wars play out across the entire franchise because their very nature being non-linear, of course that would happen. This has accounted for changes happening with established history, such as the timeline of Khan Noonien Singh. First, encountered by the crew of the Enterprise in the episode Space Siege, that was in 2266. This was an adult version of Khan who had escaped from Earth in 1996 aboard the SS Botany Bay. While the Kelvin universe Khan's timeline would roughly follow the same kind of years, the recent episode Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow has shown an entirely new version of Khan's story. La'an Noonien Singh was drafted by a dying temporal agent sent into an alternate universe where she met James T. Kirk, with the pair of them being sent back in time to the 21st century to Toronto. There, she encountered a child, Khan. In this version of history, subtle changes had been made, this time by Romulan temporal agents, that effectively shifted the happenings, if you like, of established Earth history that therefore meant that Khan's despotic era of the 90s didn't happen, as he hadn't been born yet. It's not to say that they won't happen. This was foreshadowed in the Star Trek Picard episode Farewell, when a defeated Adam Soon picked up a folder entitled Project Khan that was date-stamped 1996. While we have yet to see the exact ramifications of this connection in the franchise, something tells me that this is not the last time we will see Khan. Number 7. Romulan Participation and First Contact. In Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, the seemingly human Sarah is revealed to be a Romulan agent sent through time to delay human advancement. The Prime Universe La'an Noonien Singh, along with an alternate version of James T. Kirk, travel back in time and do manage to stop her, though not before she fatally wounds Kirk. In this version of the timeline, the Romulan Star Empire had managed to slow human development sufficiently that by the 23rd century, they had been able to effectively stop the Federation from becoming the powerhouse that it was. Not only that, but managed to stop the alliance between Earth and Vulcan and had effectively annihilated the Vulcan way of life as well. It is Sarah who reveals that their actions have shifted timelines around, although she retains knowledge of the other timeline. She takes just a little bit too much enjoyment in being the one to kill James T. Kirk to convince me that she didn't know the true history of the franchise. The greater fallout from these actions delay not only the eugenics wars, but also World War III, when Picard and crew travel back to Bozeman, Montana, and of course let's not forget when Dax, Sisko, Bashir, and the crew of La Sirena all go back to the 21st century as well. They find cities on the brink of, but not quite in the grip of, total dissolution. As Pike's speech to the Kylie highlights, all of these wars together throughout the supposed late 90s and early 21st century blended together to become, yes, the eugenics wars, yes, World War III, and he also names the Second War of Independence. It seems that the Vulcan First Contact is a fixed point in time, even with the shifting dates. So now it remains to be seen if, when the T'Plana Hath lands, do they find Earth post-World War III or in the grips of. Number 6. The Curious Case of Lieutenant Yor. The Temporal Accords were put in place in the late 28th century after the development of time travel. This was an agreement to restrict the use of time travel for purely scientific reasons. Naturally, this was almost immediately abused, and that led to the sad fate of Lieutenant Yor. Yor was a time soldier and became the first documented person to move not only through time, but across dimensions. His point of origin was the year 2379, but his place of origin was the Kelvin universe, which was confirmed by Dr. Kovage to Dr. Culber. Yor began to experience the side effects of this extended time travel, and it became so severe so quickly that his doctors actually requested that he be allowed to time travel home again. The interdimensional displacement restriction, which was in place by the time Yor was there, forbade this, and poor Yor was refused permission to go home again. With no other options, the Betelgeusians' doctors requested permission to euthanize him. This was all revealed when Emperor Philippa Georgiou began to experience similar effects of time and dimension hopping as well. Her travel, which was so very much further than yours, was expected to be so very much worse, which prompted the crew of Discovery to look for another way to get her home again. Unfortunately, this makes us think that perhaps Prime Spock, Nero, and the crew of the Narada may have felt similar effects throughout the remainder of their lives as well. Number 5. Future Guy. Enterprise's pilot episode introduced us to the shadowy figure that we never saw in complete clarity. He was shown to be helping the cabal of Suliban who were attempting to mess with time, and his actions were most often shown to be hindering Starfleet. This was not always the case, which supports Brannon Braga's assertion that if Enterprise were to have received a 5th season, Future Guy would be revealed to be none other than Jonathan Archer himself, working via time travel to change certain elements of the past. This would have enormous ramifications for the franchise, because you would have seen a character who would have been a lead protagonist seemingly turning to an antagonist for the first time. This technology could not have come from the 22nd century, so that supports the idea that Archer may have traveled to the 26th, 28th, 29th, 30th, or 31st centuries, any of this period in which the Temporal Wars were being fought. The problem now is that his exact motives remain a mystery, as Enterprise finished long before we ever got the answer. Number 4. Temporal Law and Order. The official Temporal Prime Directive is usually the law that's cited that all Starfleet officers must follow. There is a bit of confusion, however, as to when exactly this law was introduced. For example, Picard didn't know about it during Rasmussen's trip to the Enterprise in A Matter of Time. Bashir cited a different guideline when he was sent back to 21st century Earth. Janeway was aware of this by 2371, though she, and a certain James T. Kirk, had so many temporal violations to their name that these might have been isolated cases. The versions of Chakotay and Kim from 2390 knew of it, as did Admiral Janeway in 2404. It was most likely written in the 29th century and policed by temporal agents such as the crew of the USS Relativity. This Federation ship was tasked with making sure the flow of history continued as it was meant to do, and this would have been while the Temporal Wars were in full effect. Knowing that the Relativity, Braxton, and Duquesne were all working to thwart the wars brings USS Voyager into the Temporal Wars as well, even if they weren't actually named on screen at that point. Number 3. Carl. The Temporal Wars changed the being known as the Guardian of Forever. When it was first encountered by Starfleet, it held a quasi-circular form, though after the wars it had evolved to make itself appear as the being we would see as Carl. Carl explained that during the Temporal Wars, it was repeatedly abused by agents on all sides so that it could be a point of departure to travel through time. Way back in its first appearance in The City on the Edge of Forever, it described itself as a tool by which people could step through the pages of history, and in the animated series episode Yesteryear, it largely retained this service as well. The abuse that it received from time soldiers and temporal agents seems to have mellowed it a little bit, to the point where Carl wanted to fully evaluate Georgiou before electing to help her or not. Carl also had the power to send her across dimensions, and this was a power that we previously didn't know the Guardian possessed. Who or what originally built the Guardian of Forever remains unknown, as they had been extinct for many eons before even the Enterprise encountered it in the beginning. Right now, it seems that Carl is an ageless being who's going to put you through a test before he lets you use him. Number 2. Enterprise J and Dauntless. The Enterprise J, which was recently rendered in a stunning way by Otoy and the Roddenberry Archive, was originally designed by Doug Drexler. It was a city ship full of skyscrapers and lush vegetation, which seems to have been an inspiration for the 32nd century ship, the Angelou class. Its only on-screen appearance takes place in the episode Azati Prime, and even that comes with a caveat, because Lieutenant Daniels sends Archer to the ship on which they are standing. So basically on screen, we haven't got an exterior view of the Universe class yet. This, of course, was the Battle of Procyon 5. This was one of the most crucial moments of the Temporal Wars, and it's also now a figment of what if, as Enterprise's defeat of the Sphere Builders has effectively wiped it from history. It originally took place in the 26th century, features the Enterprise J joined by other Federation starships, and the Dauntless. The Dauntless's design originated from Arturus' ship in the episode Hope and Fear. This would then make a return after being updated and adapted by one B'Elanna Torres to appear as the USS Dauntless in Star Trek Prodigy. This means that at least one element of the Battle of Procyon 5 could still have happened, and if one part of it could have, any part of it could have. Number 1, the Sphere Builders. The Sphere Builders remain one of the most influential factions of the Temporal Wars. They could look into alternate futures, so they were able to look ahead and see themselves losing to the Federation at the Battle of Procyon 5. They then took steps to avert this outcome. Around the 12th century, in our reckoning, they arrived in what would become known as the Delphic Expanse. They began to build these large spheres that could retrofit our space to resemble something a little bit closer to their own realm. They also recruited the Xindi by effectively lying to them and telling the Xindi that the Federation would be responsible for the destruction of their second homeworld. This led to the assault on Earth by the Xindi, which claimed 7 million lives. Despite this, the sphere builders eventually lost the trust of the Xindi arboreals, primates, and aquatics. They then threw their lot in with the Xindi reptilians and insectoids, and even then it was eventually solely the reptilians with whom they had been working to develop genetic weapons as well. Enterprise was able to destroy the key sphere in their network, which destroyed the entire network and forced the sphere builders back into their realm. This reset the Delphic Expanse and set a course not for the destruction of humanity, the Federation, and everything all in between, but to the Xindi joining Starfleet over the years. Hi, I'm Duncan Rillick, no relation, and I'm GTN's new progenitor expert. And I collect relics from before the burn. And I'm here to tell you about Squarespace. Using their next generation fluid engine, I created a website that isn't crud. They even have templates, and using them is as smooth as a progenitor's head. Creating an online store was a doddle. You can even create your own merch with Squarespace. They'll handle production, inventory, and super fast pathway shipping. So here's your red directive. Go to https://www.squarespace.com/TrekCulture for a free trial and 10% off your first website or domain purchase. I've been Duncan Rillick, no relation. That's everything for this list, and this is something that I feel we very much will be doing a follow-up list to. So if there's anything that you particularly want answers about, let us know in the comments below. Thank you very much to Chris for the original idea for this article as well. Make sure that you're giving Chris a follow at EditChrisEdit on the various socials. I'm at Sean Ferrick on the various socials, and our wonderful editor Tom at Tom C. Finn or at Tom Roberts Finn on the various socials. Make sure you're following at TrekCulture on Blue Sky, TikTok, and Twitter, at TrekCulture YT over on Instagram. You are awesome, you are wonderful, look after yourselves. I will see you last week. Live long and prosper. Thanks very much.